I don't think I've ever screamed at the TV as much as I have when I watched this film. This is absolutely ridiculous. From 2020, this is Lifetime's Deadly Mile High Club. I'm Jay Harangue and I've wasted hours of my life watching terrible films.
You should subscribe.
Meet Jake Sherman. He's the main character.
Hi.
Jake is pathetic. I also suspect he might be how do I say this? A fucking retard. But more on that later. Jake works for his mother-in-law who hates him. He's supposed to be an operations manager, but all he does is stack shelves. Perhaps he's employed as a shelf stacker, but writes operations manager on LinkedIn.
Well, isn't that what most people do?
Yes. Yes, it is.
Anyway, Jake doesn't want to be a shelf stacker all his life. He has a dream, and that dream is to fly planes. So he's joined this flight school, and the instructor is this woman, Tanya.
What's your name?
Jake Sherman?
Jake Sherman. Pathetic. Anyway, Jake just happens to also be the name of Tanya's ex-boyfriend, who she killed when she crashed a plane.
Okay.
And even though they look nothing alike, Tanya's convinced herself that Jake is the reincarnation of her dead boyfriend.
You came back.
Unfortunately for Tanya, Jake is already married to this woman, Annie, who wears a rubbish hat. She's doing a PhD, but that's boring, so we'll ignore that.
Good.
Here comes Annie's mum and Jake's boss, Margaret. Margaret hates Jake, and to be honest, I don't blame her. I'd be pretty pissed off if I had a daughter who grew up and married a retard.
Obviously.
Margaret's like, Jake, you're the worst shelf stacker ever. And he's like, I don't care, I'm taking flying lessons.
Flying lessons? Don't you have to be like, smart to do that?
Yeah, she's got a point. But Jake's like, I'm going to fly planes, you'll see. And Margaret's like, if this flying business gets in the way of your shelf stacking, I'm going to sack you. And he's like, no, it won't. Annie and Jake have no money, by the way. She's a student and he stacks shelves for her mum. And only now is Annie questioning how Jake has paid for flying lessons.
I checked and they're not cheap.
No, they're not.
She's like, you should really cancel them then, shouldn't you?
Look, what I really want to do is get my own airplane.
Oh yeah, because that's a much cheaper option. What a fucking retard. And he's like, also, Jake, how are you going to fly planes? You're thick as mince. And he's like, no, I'm not. You sound like your mum. And Annie's like, right, that's it. Go to your sofa. So Jake's banished to the living room. The next morning, Jake's in a flight simulator with Tanya. And it sounds like he's really getting the hang of this flying stuff.
Departure to the,
Okay, maybe not. Tanya is so obviously perving on him, but of course he's completely oblivious. And oh no. After class, Jake asked Tanya if she thinks he has what it takes. And she's like, oh yeah, definitely.
Bullshit.
She's like, how about I take you up in a plane now? And he's like, yeah, okay. So that's happening. Tanya tells Jake she needs to make a delivery in Palm Springs and asks if he wants to come. He's like, yeah, okay. But the delivery story is a lie.
I made the whole thing up.
oh.
There's a hotel around the corner.
I can't. I should get home.
So you can sleep on the sofa?
Minutes later at the hotel.
I can't.
Tanya's like, okay, that's fine. But it's clearly not fine because she goes to the bathroom and starts eating a towel.
Why don't you bring your wife to class next Thursday and I will take you both up.
Excuse me?
What a ridiculous suggestion. Who would agree to that after what's just happened? Oh, right, Jake's agreed to it. Brilliant. Anyway, Tanya tilts the plane to the side, opens the door and pushes Annie out.
Oh my gosh.
Oh, no, she doesn't. That was just her fantasy. She absolutely hates Annie because she wants Jake for herself. So the next day on Jake's flying lesson, Tanya just happens to be flying right over Jake's house. She's like, oh, look, Jake, there's your house. And there's your wife in a rubbish hat kissing another man. So that night when Jake gets home...
Who's the guy?
What guy?
The guy you were kissing this afternoon. I saw you. You took him in here and you had sex with him, didn't you?
I was at school.
Why don't you just admit it?
She's like, because it wasn't me. And he's like, well, I know what I saw. I'm going to stay at my friend Tom's house. Who's Tom, you ask? Don't worry, we never see him. The next day at flying school, while Tanya's showing the class a first aid kit, Jake is somewhat distracted. After class, Tanya's like, are you okay? And he's like, no, I moved out because Annie's cheating on me. And she's like, oh, right, that's sad. Let's have sex.
It's too soon. Sorry.
On his way out, he bumps into these two women. They're sales reps for another flight school run by stunt pilot Gonzo Rogers. They try to get Jake to ditch Tanya and get lessons from Gonzo instead and invite him to an open evening. But Tanya comes out and sees this and she's like, stop trying to poach my students.
Get lost.
But Jake turns up at the open evening anyway. Gonzo Rogers tells Jake how much better he is than Tanya and reminds him how Tanya once crashed a plane and killed her boyfriend. So Jake just agrees to join his school instead. Later that night at Invisible Tom's house, Jake gets a call from Tanya. She's like, is it still too soon to have sex? And he's like, yeah, oh, and by the way, I'm leaving your flying school, going to Gonzo Rogers instead.
Sunday at noon, he's doing a solo stunt demonstration for all the new students.
What?
Seems a bit of a weird thing to say. I wonder if that's going to be relevant later. Anyway, Tanya cries. The next morning at Annie's house, Annie tells Margaret that Jake has moved out.
I told you not to marry him, but did you listen to me? No.
Margaret is convinced that the reason Jake is accusing Annie of having an affair is because he's having one himself.
Well, that makes sense.
Yeah, apparently that's something that happens. Anyway, Margaret goes round to Invisible Tom's house and starts shouting at Jake, but he's on his way to Gonzo's stunt show where Tanya is cutting wires in the plane. Gonzo sees her there and he's like, oh, hi, Tanya. I hope you're here to watch the show. And she's like, yeah, that's right. When the new students get there, Gonzo's like, right, who wants to come up in the plane with me? And Jake is first to volunteer.
How about you, young man? What's your name again?
Jake?
I don't think that's a good idea.
Gonzo's like, why not? And she's like, So it looks like Jake's in trouble.
Jake!
Jake's like, oh no, it's my mother-in-law. You better take someone else. So Gonzo goes up on his own instead. Jake tells Margaret to piss off, then joins the group to watch the stunts.
What's going on?
Safety is our #1 priority.
At an unspecified time later, Jake is back stacking shelves for Margaret. Tanya comes in to see him and she's like, when are you coming back to class? And he's like, I can't, my mother-in-law don't let me. Even though he and Annie are still separated. Tanya's like, how about I give you private lessons for free? And he's like, yeah, okay. Margaret has seen them talking, so Googles female flying instructor and finds out who Tanya is. So she goes to see her at the airport and accuses her of having an affair with Jake. Tanya tells her it's all a big misunderstanding and offers her a ride in her plane to Santa Barbara. Margaret's like, that'd be nice, thanks. So up they go. On the way there, Margaret's talking about Jake.
Jake's actually a really good pilot.
Jake? Please.
Why do you have such a low opinion of your son-in-law?
Because he's an idiot.
True.
But Tanya doesn't want to hear this. So she's dead at the funeral.
What about the business?
We're gonna sell the place. And I'm gonna fly airplanes.
Jake then tells Tanya that he's planning to go back to Annie, but Tanya's like, I wouldn't if I were you. I took these aerial photos of her the other day. The photos are clearly of another woman wearing the same hat that Tanya saw Annie wearing once, but Jake just can't see it.
Because he's an idiot.
So he's back flying with Tanya again.
Yeah, you're doing great.
You're not just saying that?
But all this pilot training is getting boring.
Houston, we have a problem.
Yeah! And then they bang. Meanwhile, Annie's found a letter in her mailbox that was supposed to be delivered to her neighbour, who just happens to have a Ring doorbell.
I have a favor to ask.
So her neighbour shows her the doorbell footage for the last few weeks that shows the other woman in a rubbish hat at her house with a man. Annie searches her license plate and tracks her down.
You were in my driveway a couple weeks ago, weren't you?
Oh man, they didn't get permission, did they?
Who's they?
She's like, it was the woman who told me to wear this rubbish hat, no offence, and have at it with a guy at your house.
They were shooting us from an airplane.
An airplane.
So finally, someone has figured it out. Annie sends Jake a message saying that Tanya has framed her, but he's in the shower. Tanya gets to his phone and replies, let's meet at the house, then deletes the messages. When Jake gets out of the shower, Tanya tells him she has a couple of errands to run.
I'll come with you.
No, that's all right.
Yeah, you stay here, Jake. I'll meet you at the airport. Hang on, what's she doing with a first aid kit? Oh, of course, she's grabbing the chloroform. Is this normal? I've never seen chloroform in a first aid kit. Anyway, so Tanya heads off to Annie's house. So Tanya puts her in this box, ties her up and gags her. Oh, look, she's taking it on the plane.
And why is that?
What?
Yeah, no idea. This is a terrible plan.
What's in the box?
Yeah, the main office asked me to make a delivery on the way out of town.
You're lying to me, aren't you?
Oh my God, he's finally caught on.
Because you said the same thing when we went to Palm Springs.
Unbelievable. Anyway, Jake's like, I'll help you put the box on the plane. And off they go. Oh, look, Jake's doing some sit-ups on the box. Oh, right, yeah, that makes more sense. When they finish...
What's in the box anyway?
Fish food.
Fish food?
Yeah.
Yes, somehow... yes. Yes, somehow Tanya has convinced Jake that this box is full of fish food that needs to be dumped in the ocean from the plane.
Because he's an idiot.
Yeah.
Anyways, so she convinces him to open the door and throw the box of fish food out. This guy is a fucking moron.
You're probably right about that.
But then he starts asking... But then he starts asking if the box is biodegradable.
Just push out the damn box. We do it all the time.
Are you sure?
My God.
Jake!
What the hell?
So finally Jake realizes what's been going on.
At last.
Tanya's like, come on, Jake, just push the box out. It's biodegradable. But he's like, no. So she hits him over the head with a fire extinguisher and jumps out of the plane with a parachute. And he manages to escape from the box and tries to fly the plane. But she is not a trained pilot. Oh, it's okay. Jake's woken up and all of a sudden he's Ted Stryker. And he's like, look, there's Tanya, who somehow is in front of them. So Jake calls the police from his little headset and knocks her down with engine thrust. And yeah, Jake's the hero and finally his wife has some respect for him. At an unspecified time later...
I slept with Tanya. She made me think you were having an affair. You know that. I feel terrible. I'm sorry.
But Annie forgives him and that's the end of the film. So until next time. Thank you for watching this video. Please like and subscribe. And please consider joining my Patreon. There's a link in the description. Thank you.